I'm Caroline Foot, advisor at the Tenant Farmers Association. Going to talk today a little bit about practical issues with rent reviews. It might vary a little bit, perhaps obviously whether you've got an Agricultural Holdings Act tenancy or a farm business tenancy, an FBT, but I'll try and cover both in this video today. So firstly, Agricultural Holdings Act tenancies, there is a formula within the Act. It's a little bit misleading, not a numeric formula, but it just lists out what should and should not be considered at rent review. It quite vaguely says that all relevant factors should be considered, but there are 5 specific things it lists out. So those are the terms of the tenancy, the character and situation of the holding, its productive capacity and its related earning capacity, and rents that are paid for other similar holdings let on the same basis. So all those things should be considered. No one is any more important than the other, and the whole farm should be looked at as one, so house, land and buildings all together as a single farm unit. Anything non-agricultural happening on the holding, any diversification or subletting, might be looked at separately depending on sort of the arrangement you've got. Unfortunately, in practice, I quite often see landlords or their agents coming forward not referring to the formula or even with no justification at all. So we would always suggest that tenants should be steering it back to that formula and making sure that any changes are justified. FBTs obviously vary a little bit from, or quite a lot actually, from AHA tenancies. Their statutory basis is the open market value. So that's looking at essentially what that holding would fetch on the open market if let between a willing landlord and a willing tenant. So that means essentially looking at comparable holdings. So we have that factor in the AHA review, but it's only one element, whereas for FBTs, it's all that's considered. So when looking at those comparable rents and the comparable holdings, obviously in reality no two farms are exactly the same. So there will need to be adjustments made depending on differences. So that could be physical differences to the holding, things like soil type or quality, its location, the number and quality of buildings or of houses. But it's also important to look at any differences in the terms of the tenancy. So whether that's the repairing obligations might be different, there might be greater scope for diversification, or even the length of term could have an impact. So all those things need to be looked at in adjusting comparables, and that goes for the AHA analysis of those comparables as well. Unfortunately, in practice, a lot of the comparables that are put forward by landlords and their agents don't necessarily have the depth of detail that's needed for that analysis and to make those adjustments. So again, we would suggest that tenants go back and bring it back to what should be provided, make sure those changes to rents are actually justified. So that's the statutory basis for farm business tenancy rents. But the nature of FBTs is to be flexible, so there could be an alternative method agreed between the parties. It could be a different formula, could be linked to inflation or perhaps to commodity prices. You could agree to have no rent review at all, or to put it on the AHA basis, even though it's an FBT. So either way, whether you've got an AHA tenancy, a statutory FBT rent review, or whether it's something else that's been agreed, we would always suggest that tenants just make sure that whatever's the statute or what's been agreed is being followed, and that any changes to the rent are justified. And if you've got any questions about rent reviews or want to find out any more information, we've got guidance notes in the members area of our TFA website. It's on rent reviews generally, but also on specific elements. So for example, how farmhouses are treated, but TFA advisors are always on hand if you have any more questions.